Hey there guys, Ryan here. I play chess, put my videos on YouTube, and today I'd like to look at a pretty interesting game that I just played against a 14-16 rated player, so he's pretty darn good, and more so I wanted to analyze some lines in the French defense, and hopefully you can learn something from this and maybe implement it into your own games. But let's just look at the regular lines. I'm going to talk about it, the opening, and then we're going to watch how the game plays out. So the start is going to be a little bit more instructional, and then the end is just going to be some potential variations that you can run into. So the French defense is the response to White's e4 move, and this is the opening to the French defense. We play e6, and immediately we are not attacking the center. We're setting up to attack the center on our second move. The French defense is actually my favorite opening to play against black because I think it gives you a lot of options to counterattack on your opponent's queen side. That's a common theme in the French defense. You're going to find that black's play is mainly on the queen side, and white tries to counterattack on the king side. So this is how the setup, the original opening for black goes, and immediately we can see that we are setting up a nice blockade against our f7 square. If you know anything about chess, you know that the f-pawn on either side is the most valuable and vulnerable pawn for attacking your opponent. So with this e6 move, we are immediately stopping any bishop attack. Usually likes to bring his bishop out, and that's a common theme for a lot of e4 pawn moves for white. So usually you'll see that they'll just respond with d4, trying to gain more central control, and this is the usual response from white. If he brings his knight out, that's kind of a wasted move. He's not attacking anything. There's no piece here to attack. So oftentimes you'll see this d4 move, and we are just going to respond simply with d5. Now we are immediately attacking the center, trying to gain control of this central square. These four squares in chess are a good determinant of the game. Who's occupying these four squares. You should always try and control the center. If he takes right here, that's totally fine. We'll just go ahead and recapture with this pawn, and it'll be a completely even game. But more times, white likes to maintain his central control, and so more often than not, you will see them push this pawn. This is called the advanced variation of the French. And he goes ahead and does that. And now black's main counterplay is he tries to hang on to his initiative on the center here, and one way to do that is to undermine this d4 pawn, and this is basically black's only way to maintain any central control. And you can see immediately, we're setting up to take this pawn. We're going to have a nice pawn chain right here. So oftentimes, they almost never take it. If they do take it, it allows us to develop our bishop out here with tempo, and that's a nice developing move, a nice square for our bishop. We're attacking this f pawn right here. So 99% of the time, players are not going to take this pawn. What they're going to do is defend the pawn. Again, they're going to set up this pawn chain, and for the next few moves, all black is going to do is try to attack this d4 pawn. This is the usual line in the advance. You bring out your knight to attack this again, and white's going to go ahead and defend. So right now we've got a pretty interesting game, and this is why I love the French defense so much, is because it's very even all the way, and it's full of tactics and allows black to oftentimes win a pawn if they don't play absolutely correct. The next move in this line for black is moving his queen right here. I know that bringing your queen out too early is frowned upon often, but what this does is it's very solid in preventing this bishop from moving. And it also reinforces our attack right here. And it makes it just very hard for white to move this bishop at any point, which, if you notice, white has an initiative on the light squares, and black has an initiative on the dark squares. And that's a common theme throughout this whole game. What you'll also notice is that black's light square bishop is now trapped in. This isn't so much of an issue, as I'll try to explain later on. We're just going to develop here to the d7 square and stop any potential discovered checks with this bishop. So let's just see what the next move was. He brings his knight right here, because if he moved it right here, I would simply just win a pawn. So he develops his knight to the square right here. And I protect with the bishop now. The reason for doing this is kind of simple. I wish I could show it to you, but if I take this d4 pawn, he takes back. I take with the knight here, he takes with the knight. I take with the queen, and for example, if his knight was right here, his queen couldn't take back my queen. But oftentimes he can come here with a check with the bishop, and my queen will be exposed. So they just win a queen in that variation. So that's why this bishop move is very important here to stop any potential checks and shenanigans against this square. He goes here, which is a totally wasted move. I'm just going to push this pawn right here and force him back. It's a thing to keep in mind with your games, is you never want to lose the initiative, or just allow your opponent to develop with tempo on your pieces. So always be wary of that. That was a mistake on his part. So how do I add more pressure to the center here? I develop my knight right here with the idea of bringing it to this f5 square. that would add a fourth attacker to this pawn, and at that point they usually say, forget it, I'm just going to take this pawn. Oftentimes I won't develop my queen here, and I just started doing this because I started following a old grandmaster who only played the French defense, and this is what he liked to do the best, and I've been having a lot of success with this so far. But even if my queen was still here and I move my knight right here, you might think that I'm just, giving up this pawn now, but that's not really the case, because if he does end up taking it right here, I'm going to develop my knight to this square, the g6 square, have a double attack on this, which is undefendable, as well as an attack on this. So I'm just going to develop with tempo if he decides to take right here. So in this variation, I just bring my knight right here, and I have very good development comparatively to white right now. He develops his bishop, and this allows me to win the pawn. And this is what you'll oftentimes see, is he's trying to pin my knight right now to my queen. It's a good attack, but that's the significance of bringing your queen right here, and this is a big mistake from him. I'm also not afraid of this threat, because I can always come in with check and remove the pinned piece against my queen. And I go ahead and do that. And he recaptures with the pawn, which I think is a little bit of a mistake, but, this guy had a pretty tough game, I guess. So this allows me to win a second pawn. I take this second pawn now, and black is up 2 pawns. And his pawn structure is ruined, his pieces are in terrible positions, and I've got this nice central control, this nice pawn chain. He's got an isolated pawn right here, and so he brings his knight back here because I'm attacking his knight, so he has to move it, and this allows me to win a third pawn. Now, I'm starting to make too many queen moves for my liking, and not developing enough, but, a pawn's a pawn. That was a nice central pawn to win, and now you see that I have perfect, nice development. He's got doubled pawns on his f-file, which are going to become a weakness later on. I'm pinning his bishop to his king. This is why I like the French defense so much. He threatens me with that. I just move my queen to a nice central location and defend it. He develops his queen. I develop my knight. He develops his rook. I protect my b7 pawn because there's a threat on it, and you can see that my pawn chain right now, all my pieces are connected, and that's a strategy that I like to have, is always connecting your pieces. That way there's less threats that are possible. He develops his knight attacking my bishop. I guess I'm not terribly concerned with it. I think he was more concerned with me pushing this pawn with an attack on the bishop and the rook, winning the rook, and that's probably why he moved here. But I don't mind if he takes this bishop, because I'll just recapture with the pawn and start marching these pawns up the board and hopefully queen them. I develop my bishop, prepare to castle. He threatens me with that, and one thing that I don't want is an isolated pawn right here. So I simply just move my knight out of the way, and he's now able to recapture, and I would just recapture with this pawn, and I would still have this nice pawn chain central control right here. So he goes ahead and does that. I recapture. He moves his bishop out of the way from my knight, because he doesn't want to lose that bishop. And I castle. This is another reason why I just move my knight instead of recapturing right here, is because first of all, his knight would have a nice tempo on my queen, and second of all, now my rook is along his f7 or his f2 pawn, which is really a nice open kingside file for me in the French defense. So he threatens that, which is a good threat, because he's now able to bring this bishop right here and start a strong attack on my pinned pawn right here. I can't recapture. So that's a very good move from him. His king is probably the safest in the center, given that his other pawns are all gone, and I eliminate this possibility with the bishop by moving my knight right here. I'm also opening up attack on this h2 pawn, which he does not defend. He develops the bishop. I go ahead and take that pawn, and at this point I'm threatening taking the rook. He moves his king, I take the other rook, so he's got to do something about this right now. And he just moves his king up. Like I said, his center is probably the safest place for his king at this point. He's connecting his rooks. It's probably his best move. And at this point, I just kind of want to trade. I'm up 4 pawns, so I just check here with my knight. He recaptures. I recapture with the queen. I want to get the queen off because this threat on my king right here is so strong if he brought his queen down right here. So he trades. Now my rook is elevated. It's on a nice position. It's attacking 2 pieces. And unfortunately, this allows him to come in with the knight right here, grab that pawn. And at this point in the video, we're just going to see how this plays out. I check. I check again with the bishop. And check again with that bishop. He doesn't have to trade right here, but he trades the exchange. I'm not sure if that was his best move, but he was feeling a lot of pressure against his king. So that's probably why he did it. Moves his bishop back because I have an attack on the bishop right now, and he probably wants to get his rook involved. I stop any future attack along this file by pushing this pawn here and blunting anything that he might have in mind. And he does this move, which attacks my rook and my bishop. This is a good move from him. I go ahead and threaten this check here. He comes in with a check, probably winning this pawn. and I also win a pawn back, so it's not the end of the world. Moves his king here, I connect rooks, he defends this pawn, and also gets his bishop out of the open center. I defend my bishop and stop the attack from this knight. He comes in with a check, I bring my king out even more, developing a little bit. He gets his knight out of the way in case I took this bishop. He recaptures, and then I would be able to win the knight. Usually it's not a bad idea to trade a rook for 2 minor pieces. I get my rook out of the way here because I want to get these rooks involved in the game, and right now I can't move either of them because this king is threatening. So I move him out of the way. And he's setting up a discover attack on this rook. It's not all that strong. I'm trying to queen this pawn right here. He goes through with it. I come in with a check and win his bishop. He threatens me here, and at this point in the game, what's the most important thing that I can do? The most important thing I can do is queen this pawn. So I have an option here of he's going to either take it with this knight after I move my king, or I can defend with this rook and get this rook out of the way, off the board, and lose both rooks. So I decide to trade both rooks off the board because at this point this rook is the only thing that's stopping me from achieving what I want to do the most, which is queen this pawn. So I think that exchanging right here is the best thing. So he takes, I take back with the pawn, and he takes back with the knight. Now if you notice, there's no possible way for him to defend me. It's one thing in the endgame you should always do. One of the easiest things to do is count your squares and your moves. How many moves do I have before I can queen this pawn? I have 1, 2, 3. His king, to defend this, has 1, 2, 3 as well. Okay, so 1, 1, 1, 1, queen, and then I'd win the queen. Another thing is this knight. This is something you can do. This is another reason why I traded, is this knight can no longer defend it, because before what you could do with this knight is move him to this square, and then this square, and then defend this queen. But now that the knight's right here, there's no way for him to defend this square anymore. So, and he resigned at this point. This is an instructional video on the French defense, and I hope you enjoyed it, and wish you the luck, best of luck in your chess games, and have a good night. Thanks. Bye-bye. What's up, guys? Thanks again for watching my video here today. I really appreciate it, and if you have any questions about any specific moves or anything about the game, please leave them below. I'd love to answer those. And last but not least, if you got anything out of this video at all, or you just simply enjoyed it, I would highly encourage you to subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and that way you can, get in touch with any future videos that I put out. Anyways, have a good rest of your day, and good luck in your chess.